So we're going to be going over page 545, the odds, starting with number 1. So we need to change -8/15 into a decimal. So when we do that, we always divide the numerator by the denominator. Decimal hop, give yourself 3 zeros. 15 goes into 8 0 times. Bring down. Then we're going to divide 15 into 80, and that goes in 5 times. 5 times 15 is 75. Subtract, we get 5. 15 goes into 50 3 times at 45. Subtract, 5 again, bring down. 15 goes into 50, still 3 times. And if you were to keep dividing, you would notice that 3 is going to repeat. So a repeating bar would be the best way to show that. And again, the answer is a negative. That's how the fraction started. Okay, number 3. Same concept, -13/6. It is always the numerator that is being divided by the denominator. Decimal hop, 3 zeros. 6 does go into 13 twice at 12. Subtract and I get 1. Bring down. 6 into 10 once at 6. Subtract, I get 4. 6 into 40 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. Subtract, there's that 4 again. Bring down. 6 into 40 6 times. Again, if you were going to keep dividing, you notice that 6 would just keep going on. So the best way to express that would be to have a repeating bar just over the 6. That's the only digit that repeats. It was a negative, so it should be a negative here. Number 5. Now we are going to write the decimal as a fraction, all about place value, how we read it. We would read this as -6/10. So that's how we write it. We need to make sure we express our answer in simplest form, so we'll just go ahead and divide these by 2 to get -3/5, or -3/5. Okay, number 7. So read it. How would you read it? You would read it -5 8/10. This is the tenths place. Again, we need to express our answer in simplest form. So divide that fraction, the numerator and denominator, by 2 to make it -5 4/5. Okay, new page for Mrs. Marion. Number 9. Okay, for number 9, we get to add these two fractions, 9/10 and -4/5. Before we add, we need to make sure we have a common denominator. So we're going to use tenths as our common denominator. It's not the only one, but it seems to be the easiest one. So we would double these to get -8/10. When we add fractions, the denominator doesn't change. And let's look at our numerators. I have 9, I owe you 8, which means I only have 1. I have more than I owe, which makes this a positive. Number 11, -1 6/10 plus -2 4/10. So these are both amounts that we owe. So we need to add those together. Decimal points line up to figure out the total that we owe. 6 plus 4 is 10, carry the 1. 2 plus 1 plus 1 makes 4. So if you write your answer as -4.0, totally fine. Or you can simply say, I owe 4. Both are right. 13. Okay. 13 is moving on to subtraction. I'm gonna just write these mixed numbers vertically to begin with. So 3 3/4 minus 7/8. This is a review from way back but oh well, let's do it anyways. We need a common denominator. Let's go ahead and use ace for that. So 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8. Ew, I can't take away 7 from 6, so I need to borrow. 3 becomes a 2. I borrowed 1 whole. We're going to express that as 8/8. That's equivalent to the 1 that I borrowed over here. I started with 6. I'm adding 8, which means I have 14/8 to subtract now. Okay, so then we're going to work on our subtraction. I have 14/8. I'm taking away 7/8. 14 minus 7 is 7/8. On to the whole numbers. 2, there was no whole number here, minus nothing is 2. 4, 2, and 7/8. Number 15. A turtle is 20 5/6 inches below the surface. It dives to a depth of 3 1/4 inches. What is the change in the turtle's position? In other words, what is the distance that he traveled? So we need to subtract those two. 32 1/4 minus 20 5/6. Let's use a common denominator of 12ths. So this would be multiplied by 2, making it 10/12. The first fraction we'd be multiplying by 3 to get 3/12. Looks like they really want us to practice our borrowing here because we can't take away 10 from 3. So we borrow. 32 becomes a 31. I borrowed 1 whole, so I'm going to add that 1 whole in the form of 12/12. I started with 3. I'm borrowing 12, which means I have 15/12. And now I can subtract. So 15 minus 10 is 5. And the denominator was 12. And 31 minus 20 is 11, but we're not quite done because if we read the question carefully, it says the turtle started at 20 5/6 inches and it dives to a depth of 32 1/4. So that turtle is traveling down, which makes it a negative 11 5/12. Okay, on to number 17. Okay, now we're going to divide negative 4/11 by 2/7. So we will keep 4/11. We will change division to multiplication, and then we have to change 2/7 into 7/2. And this was a negative. So I'm going to do my reducing first. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. I can't reduce 7/11, so I'm going to multiply straight across. I'm going to determine the sign at the end. So I'm just going to look at the numbers. 2 times 7 is 14. 11 times 1 is 11. And the opposite of a positive makes this a negative. But we should probably express it in the form of a mixed number. It didn't say that we had to, and it started as fractions, but I'll show it anyways. 11 goes into 14 once. I'm going to carry over my negative sign. There are 3 left over out of 11. In this case, since they both started as fractions, I would say either one of these answers is acceptable. Okay, number 19. Now we're going to divide with decimals. So negative 15 4/10 divided by negative 2 5/10 or negative 2 1/2. So the first number becomes our dividend. So 15.4 is being divided by 2.5. We need this out here to be our divisor to be a whole number, so multiply by 10. Do the same here. I always rewrite just so I don't get mixed up. So I'm dividing 25 into 154. I already know it's not going to go in evenly, so I'm going to add a decimal point, hop it up, and add some zeros. We'll see if we need them all. 25 doesn't go into 1 or 15. It goes into 154 6 times. 6 times 25 is 150. Subtract, I get 4. Bring down. 25 goes into 40 once at 25. Subtract and I get 15. Ooh, nice. Bring down. 25 does go into 150 evenly at 6 times. 6 times 25 is 150. Subtract and I get 0, which means I don't need that last 0. Let's check the sign. The opposite of a negative makes our answer a positive. 21. These fractions started as smashed together. We know smashed means multiplication. I'm gonna just plug in a multiplication symbol, and I'm just gonna not write the parentheses. We don't need them. I can't reduce 8 and 3. I can't reduce 15 and 2, so I'm gonna multiply straight across. 8 times 2 is 16. 15 times 3 is 45. And the opposite of that positive makes it a negative, and I can't reduce. 23. 4 and 5/10 times -5 and 26/100. So I'm gonna set it up with 5.26 on top, 4.5 underneath. I'm gonna deal with the sign at the end. 6 times 5 is 30, carry the 3. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is 13, carry the 1. And 5 times 5 is 25, plus 1 is 26. Done with the 5, placeholder, check that. That could be your error. Cross these out. 6 times 4 is 24, carry the 2. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10, carry the 1. And 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 makes 21. Add them up. 0 plus 0 is 0. 4 plus 3 is 7. 6 and 0 is 6. 3 and 2. So we can estimate where our decimal point is going to go. 5 times 4 is 20. This is a little more than 4. This is a little more than 5. So a little more than 20 would make it 23. You could also use the trick. There was 3 numbers behind the decimal points. Hop it over 1, 2, 3 spots. Let's check the sign. 1 was a negative. The opposite of a positive makes our answer a negative. Okay, couple more. One more, actually. 25. So I always talked about in class how we need to be, we didn't want to use the word lazy mathematicians, but we want to be efficient mathematicians. So if I look at the numbers presented, I want to work them out in the easiest way possible. Commutative property says I can multiply these in any order. Well, look at these. 0.5, 5/10, that's equivalent to half. So I'm just gonna think of this as what's half of -20? Well, half of 20 is 10. And then all I need to do is multiply -1 6/10 by 10. Well, if you're familiar with your powers of 10, all I really need to do here is move the decimal point on the 1.6 once, and I've got it. And the opposite of a negative makes it a positive. You could work it out with all your multiplication here, but I don't know why you would if you don't have to. All right, that's it. Bye.